Wake up.
In this hand, you're in an $80,000 guaranteed tournament, $50 buy-in. You have twos, and it gets raised ahead of you here. Villain under the gun +2, loose aggressive. You have 62,567 chips. Blinds are 551,100 with an ante of 135. Pre-flop, do you want to fold, call, raise to 4,825, or raise to 5,825?
This could definitely be a blind spot for me. Um, the player's loose aggressive, but deuces are just so vulnerable. I think I'd rather just flop. So while three betting does isolate this player, I think we're better off just calling in position.
We are going to call and we will discuss why we do each decision at the end of the quiz. So we call here, and the big blind calls as well. The board comes 2-5-6. It is check to us. On the flop, do we want to check bet 2,092, bet 4,183, or bet 6,274?
I definitely don't like checking. You can make a case for pretty much every bet, I think, but I think in a multi-way pot with all these draws out there, I think I want to bet. I would bet somewhere in between here, but I think I'm going to go with the smaller version this time. I'm not exactly sure why.
Okay, so let's break down this hand because the testing ends now. So pre-flop, you can go ahead and call here because even though you have two rejam stacks behind you, one of them is the big blind. It's very tempting for people right now in the big blind to just go, okay, I'm getting a great pot odds price. I'll take the flop. A couple of years back, if someone had ace 10 there or ace jack offsuit, it was just going, all the money was going into the middle every single time. Now, a very high percentage of people actually just call with those hands. So you're protected from this rejam stack somewhat. This person, we didn't actually know a ton at this table, so I didn't give you many details because I wanted to see how you play against the field. And no matter where you play now, people are pretty aggro. And it's a $55 tournament, 80,000 guaranteed, so you know there's going to be gambling. There's just when there's that much in the prize pool in a lower buy-in, you know there's going to be some serious carnage. Now, the interesting thing to me about that is, let me ask you a question. If you knew for a fact this guy had ace 2, do you think betting 6,274 would get him to fold? If you knew for a fact this guy had 3-3.
This is the one where you've smashed the board and it doesn't look like you can have much. So I think this is the one where he's going to say to bet big.
Do you think betting 6,274 would get them to fold? This is the really interesting thing to me about multi-way pots. When you're playing against guys that you don't know a ton about, and it's just a huge field, and a lot of guys are just gambling, having fun. You'll hear people say a couple different things, which is it'll get checked to them here, and they'll have backdoor diamonds, some overcards and whatnot, and they won't bet because they'll say nobody's folding anything. And yet then they'll flop a set, and they'll bet like 2,000 here, or they'll bet 4,000 here. It's if nobody's folding anything, nobody's folding anything.
That's a good point.
What is the one hand you lose if you do bet bigger?
Overcards.
You're going to lose the ace high overcards.
Yeah.
If this player has ace jack, typically with two cards to the wheel draw, especially if they have a diamond, if you bet 2,000, you probably get a call. That's it. But if you bet 4,000, you're probably losing that hand anyway. So you're losing the high cards regardless. So the way people are playing here is fairly one-dimensional. It's fairly binary. Not even binary. We'll say three options here. If they have... No, it's binary. If they have a pair or something better, they're playing. If they have a high card, probably going to be very difficult to get them to play in a multi-way pot. People don't like to... He's not going to like to call with a high card with this guy to act behind, especially with this short stack. he's not going to love calling a high card if you bet anything decent here. You have very deep stacks here. You have a very big incentive to bet big, because if this guy calls on this flop, and a lot of guys will, with a pair, they can't really fold on the flop. But if you get them more indebted, if you get them more inside their sunk cost fallacy, where I put a lot of money in this, if I develop anything on the turn, I better come along. You can really like clock these people for 3 straights. This is where you separate the pros from the amateurs. The pros will fire a couple of times here, and the other guy will fold, and they'll be like, yeah, you know, okay, cool. At least I didn't get sucked out on it. And that just, I don't like that. The thing that's really interesting to me here is, okay, assuming this person has a 6, a 5, a 2. If you made it 4,000 here, he can call 4,000 and then, quote, reevaluate on the turn, which is not good for us, because if the turn comes a diamond, if the turn comes an overcard, that's going to be very difficult for him to continue to justify calling down with a 5 or a 2, especially when it's for his tournament life. Now, if you bet big enough here...
This is like the pocket nines hand that I had. I think it was in Jedi Mind Tricks number 4, where the guy was in the blind with ace-7, and I had pocket nines, and it was 8-7-4. And I just bet quickly and big at the flop, and he called it, and then I jammed the turn. It was 8-7-3 when the 3 paired, and just got all the money in, and the guy snap called me for this amazingly huge pot, because he was in that situation where he couldn't fold the flop because he didn't have that kind of discipline with 1 pair, and then when the turn came off, he was already so invested in the pot that he said, you know what, I've decided this guy has ace-king for no reason, and just decided to try to hero me and look like a genius, when meanwhile he was just never ahead. And it just looks, because he's not going to figure that an overpair is going to bet that way. And since that hand, I've kind of taken the position of betting the overpair strong again in that scenario, where if someone has some of this flop, you know, if I was the raiser, or if I wasn't the raiser pre-flop, you know, with these pocket deuces, flop a set, or like if I had pocket nines or something, or 8s here, and decided for some reason just to call this player rather than 3-bet, then betting big on the flop here makes sense, because if anybody's got a piece rather than a draw, they're more likely to call. Now, we're betting too big for the draw to call, and that's the point. We're trying to induce someone to try to be a hero and see if we bet the turn, but then they realize by the turn they've already put 8,000 into this pot, and they have less than a pot bet behind. So then it becomes a question of their read, and most people don't have the discipline to fold after putting in that much. But you shouldn't be calling it on the flop anyway.
That he can't call.
Huh?
Can you look down?
Yeah.
Call comfortably, but you know for a fact he does not want to fold a pair, because that's not how people play on the internet. You can get some very interesting things to happen here. I have had people shove on me here with like 5-7. I've had people shove on me here with ace-2. I've had...
It's also like the hand from yesterday that we reviewed in the morning from the final table run, where I was blind versus blind and had second pair in the gut shot, and the guy in the big blind had third pair and a gut shot, and I went bet because I ended up picking up a flush draw on the turn, and I felt like I should be good. And even when the heart came on the, or when the river came off and it was yet another overcard, he called me with 4th pair because he was just now so invested. And we were like down to like 15 players or so. So this was not at a small point in the tournament. So I definitely see what he's saying, is when you've pretty much smashed the board, it's better off just to get called bet big, because you'll get called by the hands that you dominate. If you bet small, then the hands with draws that can actually beat you are the only ones that come along. But if you bet 6,200 here on this, you know, deuce 5-6 flop, and somebody has, you know, 2 diamonds, it's really not good for them to call, and they're going to fold. But by the same token, they're going to sit there and go, why is this guy betting so big? And people just don't see this when they have like 6-7 in their hand, or 6-4 or whatever like that, and they think that they, you know, might have more outs than they do, or they might think they're actually good at this point. You know, and except for the rare occasion where the guy has a straight, you know, then you're drawing live against him. But yeah, this is a good play that I play differently in game, but it's a wake up with me. So
People shove on
got
me
it a
here
little
with
wrong.
3-3. Anything with a gut shot is going in, and that's exactly what happened. The guy shoves his 6-4. Thankfully, he
6-4 came up with it. How about that?
doesn't get there. But it's fascinating to me. People will tell me I can't bet here as a bluff because they're not folding anything. And then when they actually flop to the hand, and it's a big field tournament, a lot of people are gambling, and it's a buy-in that people could rebuy on, they won't just fire and try to get stacks in. So this was it's a very exploitative play. Obviously, if people know what you're doing, it's a little bit more difficult, but I assume most people are not paying good enough attention to see what you're doing. And if you can, whatever gets you the most money is the play you want. And if that makes you exploitable yourself, but the other person is not going to see that counter punch, you just keep throwing that punch out.
It's true. I always say the best, the new slow play is fast play. So, all right, I like it. And there's nothing really wrong with betting a third on the pot because we're not going to lose this particular player with this range that hits the board. But the problem is we're going to invite more draws in. So I think it's one where you want to overprotect your hand because by overprotecting, you invite the hero calls from people's greed. Personally, I fold these, and I had like 4 or 5 of these that I folded on the last stream where I was just like, well, I could definitely be beat here, and I just gave it up, and fucking chat was eviscerating me. But I think 3 times we got to see the showdown, and it was a great fold. The other 2 times we don't know, but I would venture to guess I was similarly beat. But yeah, interesting point. Let's go on to the next one.
All right, in this hand we have ace queen offsuit.
That's really
We're gonna
low.
Raise it up here, standard raise, nothing to talk about. We get flattered by the button. Who's playing 33 blinds? We go heads up to the flop. Flop comes king of spades, 8 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds. Should we check? Bet 400, bet 800, or bet 1200?
I guess we raised and got called. I didn't see it. Hang on.
Flop comes king, who's playing 30 big blinds, and we go heads up to the flop. Flop comes king of spades, 8 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds. Should we check? Bet 400, bet 800, or bet 1200?
This one's interesting. I think with 30 big blinds, I like c-betting more than with 50 big blinds because it just allows for more room and more leveling by the other player. That being said, the ace-queen does hold up pretty well. We do have the diamond. So I think we can check here. And the other player is so short that I don't think we want to bet much because it's going to be very easy for him to get in versus us. And there's going to be a lot of turn scenarios where we're not going to be able to fold. So I like checking here a lot.
Normally we check a lot out of position. It changes a little bit though when we raise from early position because we have such a tight range. We're raising about 16, 17% of hands here from under the gun 7. The button's calling with a pretty wide range, so we get to be somewhat aggressive, but we're still playing about a 50-50 strategy here, checking and betting. We mostly want to use a small sizing, and you see that very commonly out of position. You really just want to use a small sizing. You don't really want to bloat the pot out of position. So our most common bet size here is going to be 400. You can bet bigger a little bit on this board because it's connected with the 8 and the 7. But mostly we want to be checking or betting small here. Our hand can go either way. I slightly prefer betting small, giving chance for my opponent to overfold, but checking is also an option. It's just really hard for our opponent to overfold on this table.
This is one where I think the buy-in is dependent. I think the smaller buy-in, the more I'd be likely to check here because you're not going to see as many overfolds as he says on this stack depth as you should. The other player, we bet 400. It's a third of the pot, but it's also just a little under 10% of his stack. So the stack to pot ratio is quickly increasing, and I think that means that we want to let the flop come off check, and then bet most turns. And I like turn and river bets better than I do flop and turn bets. There's a case to be made for a flop bet, turn check, river bet, like we had a king and we're pot controlling. But again, if it was a smaller buy-in tournament, then I think I would check more. If it's a bigger buy-in tournament, I think I would bet more. Just because that's where you're going to see the overfolds, because it has to have some value. It also depends what stage of the tournament, but this is obviously very early.
Board texture when we bet small, so we are getting value from our hand. We get some protection. I bet large. I think betting small is better here, because our opponent just has a very clean strategy here. When we bet large, it's pretty easy for them to meet the minimum defense frequency. They have straight draws, pairs, flush draws, etc. to call with, and so I'm not really generating more folds by betting larger. So that's why I prefer the smaller sizing. Opponent calls. Turns the 8 of clubs. Should we check? Bet 1,000, bet 1,800, or go all in?
Well, if we bet anything here, we're setting up a 3-barrel. I think because we're holding the ace of diamonds, we're better off just checking, and when a diamond hits the river, overbet jamming to get the bluff through. I think there are a lot of draws against us. 9-8 can be there for sure, but hands like 9-10, 2 diamonds can be there, yeah, but it's unlikely because they would see a lot of raises on the flop. 6-5, pairs of 9s, things like that. And if we go bet, check, bet, like on the river, if it comes off a non-diamond, we can bet reasonably as a bluff, like 2/3 pot, 75% pot, somewhere around there. Get a fold from pocket 9s, pocket 10s, which, might not 3-bet the button. But if it comes off a diamond, we can just overbet jam and pretty much secure the fold. So, yeah, I think this is one where we check the turn and make our move on the river.
Here on the turn, we get a kind of a neutral card. It's not the worst card because it doesn't complete any of the straights, any of the flushes, and all of his weakest floats don't continue.
I have the decibels turned all the way up on this one. I have a filter on this, so this thing should be blowing your ears out, but he just speaks so quietly that it's a little soft. So if you guys can't hear it very well, it's not my fault.
Having the ace of diamonds, we block a lot of his nut flush draw combos, which is kind of good, but we actually prefer to bet with the ace of hearts or the ace of spades, and the reason is we want to block the suited 8 combos. So
Right.
Here on the button, they don't flat with any offsuit 8, so we want to block like ace 8 of hearts, queen 8 of hearts, jack 8 of hearts, those type of hands. And having a diamond and a club here, we don't block any of the suited 8s. We're also ahead of a lot of his floating range.
That's the thing, is that by holding the ace of diamonds, he can't have the nut flush draw. So it's less likely he has suited diamonds. He can have the suited king of diamonds, and that would play exactly the same, but he'd probably have to have exactly the suited king 10 of diamonds, because I think you might see a 3-bet even from the king jack of diamonds. King queen definitely, I think, would 3-bet on the button here with a player this short. There's some schools of thought that say no, but I think you have to kind of draw from the most common reactions. So
On the flop. So I prefer checking here. Betting on the turn is perfectly fine. We don't need to bet large. We're betting like 1,000 here.
yeah, then you're just
We don't
gonna
want to
jam
bet
the
large
river.
because the button definitely has a lot of 8x in their range. So whenever that's the case, we really just want to go with a small bet. 1,000 would be our bet size. We're going to bet. No reason. We're never like going all in here or anything for 1.5x pot. There's not a lot of reason to. So I prefer a check or a small bet. I do check. This player checks back. The river is the 7 of clubs. Should we check, bet 800, bet 1,600, or bet 2,400?
It's an interesting raise, or it's an interesting river. I think if there was a king out there, we would have heard about it by now. I mean, sure, if the guy has an 8, he's going to be playing this way. But at the same time, I think now we just bet like we would bet reasonably with a king. So, like, if we jam, our hand just looks such like an ace that we're not going to get another ace to fold, I don't think. But we might. Now, if the player had something like pocket 6s. Hey, what's up, pocket? How you doing, my man? If the player had something like pocket 6s or 5s, he just got counterfeited. And that obviously we would want to check to him, but I think it's more likely because there are more combinations of hands that he could have nines or tens or draws. I think we're better off just betting here and disincentivizing this guy to call us with ace high. So I don't like going all in because we could just be jamming right into the best hand. 2400 is a little high for me, but I think it's closest to the bet I would make here. I'd make a bet of about 2200, I think. So I'm just going to go with that.
So here's a spot where you want to think about what the villain's range is on this river. So when they call a flop, they're going to have a king, an 8, a 7, a hand like 10-9, Jack-9, a lot of King X, some small pairs. Our range really doesn't want to do much betting here. And we pretty much want...
See, if I had a king, though, I would play it exactly this way. I mean, in the 8s and 7s that call us on the button, the suited ace-8 of those combinations, there's only 2 of those, ace-7 of hearts, ace-7 of clubs, or ace-7 of hearts and spades, and ace-8 of hearts and spades. So there's only 4 combinations of those. I don't think kings are giving it up, but honestly, I really feel like we would have heard about it from a king by now. I think I'm just still slowly waking up, so let's just go through the hand and see what he says.
Want to check. And the reason we want to check almost all of our range is because this player doesn't have... They can have an 8 or a 7, which obviously we don't want to bet into. They're going to have a king, which never folds and might bet themselves. They have small pairs, which are now counterfeited that we beat, or they have like straight draws. So this is a range that's really polarized to like full houses or king X and air that we want to allow bluff. So we're going to be checking here with almost our entire range on this 7 river and play accordingly. Since just because of how the range is constructed.
See, I don't agree though. I definitely think a player could have 9s or 10s here and fold to a check bet check or bet check bet
After the imposition player. So I really like checking. I don't think it makes a lot of sense here to bet small. If you are going to bet, it's going to be like an 8x type of hand that you want to just go all in with for 1.5x pot.
Yeah,
but we still want to be checking here. Our range is pretty capped. We don't really have coverage around the 8. We don't have coverage around the 7. The button does.
Meaning the 8 doesn't really exist in our hand unless we have exactly pocket 8s. Same for the 7. So there's really only 2 combinations of hands that we would be jamming with here. Maybe kings could be very likely. Would bet the flop small, would check the turn, would jam the river with pocket kings. But then again, we're still only looking at 6 combinations of that. So there's 8 total hands that are good for us to go all in with here. Otherwise, we just look like we have ace high and pocket 9s calls in a snap.
We do check here, and the button bets 800. Should we fold, call, or go all in?
See, these always suck because he's betting very small, and there's a wrinkle here where what's he going to do with an 8? He's going to bet, there's some people that say he's going to bet very small because he wants to get called. But also the 8 bets medium to large because if we have ace high, a lot of players will bluff catch because there is a pretty standard rule in poker where you never want to be calling to only win half the pot. You know what I'm saying? So we can just surrender this 1,300 that we've lost by now, or 1,200 or whatever it was, and, be fine. But if we call here and lose, and we're only going to win half the pot anyway, so we're calling 800 to win 1,300 instead of this 26, you're talking about we have to be right. What is that? 800 to win 1,300, so 2,100, 800. So that's 4, 11 and a half. It's 2 to 6.6, or no, to 5.5. So it's 1 to 275. So about 3 to 1 on our money, kinda. A little less than that. And, so we have to be right 1/3 of the time to break even, to be fair. So it makes a very big case for folding. Uh, and like I said, Matt's a very well thought out player, and I think he's seen these situations exactly, uh, you know, millions of times more than me. So personally, I'm going to call here just because it looks like a free bluff spot. Also, although I do think the bluff is bigger, I think there's something to be said for the player who's thoughtful enough. What's up, Cosero? How you doing, my man? Real good over here. I think there's something to be said for the player who says, you know what, if I had an 8 here, I would bet small to try and get called. So that's what I'm going to do with a bluff. So sometimes a small bluff works better than a big bluff. But I'm going to go with call, man. I'm just not awake yet, so.
So here we just have a crystal clear bluff catcher in terms of we beat all the bluffs. We lose to all the value bets. So now we'd have to decide, okay, how do we want to construct our defending range on the river? So we start by looking, this player's betting 800 chips to win 3,500. So if we take 800 divided by 3,500, we should be defending with roughly like 22% of our range.
See, that's really something that I don't do enough, and I'm starting to integrate it now, where you take the total pot odds, and when you're facing a bet, you sit there and say, well, this is the odds that I'm getting, so I have, 20%, and I should be defending with 33% of my range here versus his bet, so it's an easy call, you know what I'm saying, when you have the correct odds.
We get a full 22 to 23%. So therefore, we need to either call or raise with about 80% of our range. And the way that we just don't get a fold a lot of ace high to this small of a bet. Our folds are going to come from maybe we have some deuces through sixes that we didn't bet here. Maybe we had jack 9, 10, 9, those type of hands we're going to fold. And that's about it. And we're going to have to call pretty much all of our ace highs, pairs. And I don't think we ever get a fold really.
Now, I'm just going to say I think we get shown pocket 9s and 10s here more than is being considered. Because honestly, I've done that with this, and this is a thin value spot for 10s and 9s, but it's kind of a safe one. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that. It's either that or a chop, I think, a lot.
Here an ace high. We don't really want to bluff raise this hand because we don't block any of the value, the 8x or 7x combos. We really want to start bluff raising here when we have a heart or a spade that blocks the suited combos. I do call, and we lose to king jack, which is fine. I think this player should have bet bigger on the river, and I probably still would have had to pay off with this hand. So pretty standard hand.
Right on the line for the 3-bet pre-flop, though, like I said. King jack a dime, king jack suited can, 3-bet, I think. You know what? Let's run that one. Let's make sure and find out. So under the gun, let's see here. Yeah, under the gun opened, which is, well, we have to take it differently because we're shorthanded. So it's the cutoff hijack, low jack, under the gun +1. We'll take that range. And let's look up what he's supposed to do with king jack suited. This is in a perfect GTO world. Obviously, players don't play that way. But let's just look at what he's supposed to do 100% of the time. So we'll bring up the pre-flop chart. The effective stack was 30 big blinds. So he's on 30 big blinds. His position is the button. The action is versus a raise from under the gun +1. I'm saying he should 3-bet king queen suited and call with king jack suited. That's what I believe the correct play to be. I think it's right on the line. King jack suited is a call 100% of the time. My line's a little off. You should also just call with king queen suited, which I understand. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So where's the line to raise? The line to raise is much stronger than well, I guess it's not much stronger. It's ace-10 off, which of the hands you're playing, that's really not that far away. And it's only 3-betting about 70% of the time. 10s do 3-bet automatically, like I thought. 9s would call, that's fine. 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, all those hands call. But look at all these calls here. There's not many 3-bets. There's really only the premiums. down to tens, and then the queen nine suited can 3-bet more off or almost as often as the ace 10 offsuit. So interesting there. I think I would have 3-bet the king queen suited, and I guess I'm wrong there because I guess the hand just has way more playability than I think. But on 30 big blinds, I think it's close. I think you 3-bet it with 20 big blinds for sure. Let's look at that. Yeah, you go all in with 20 big blinds. So where are you at 25? Are you 3-betting much? Nope, it's just call. Because you're trying to work the money in a equity situation versus a one pair kind of situation. Interesting.
Hello,
Oh,
everyone.
there's a
Evan
Grips
Jarvis
quiz.
here for Poker Coaching.
Oh, hang on, let me turn down the filter because that probably just blew everybody's ears out. So the filter is a decibel filter. Hang on. Let's go to the default. All right.
.com. Today we are reviewing a tournament hand from the $1,100 buy.
It's a little low.
WPT Fallsview event, day 2. A deep run. In this one we have Sneak Attack in the small blind. That was the nickname for the hand 5 deuce suited. I came up playing online poker. I don't know why. I just remember that that's what it was called. Anyway, action folds around to us in the small blind. We are the table chip leader at this point, and we have a player who we've seen in a previous quiz, the tight OG Reg, who's been playing the game for 25 years. Action's on you. What should you do? Should you fold? Should you call for 2.5K into a pot of 12.5K? You raise to 12,000 or raise to 15.
I mean, we got a ton of blinds. Really enjoy these coaching sessions. Nice, man. I'm glad you do. And this isn't just coaching. This is me learning along with you guys. Like these quizzes, I haven't done them before. So interesting things come up and I get stuff wrong too. And we just kind of got to figure it out. And my idea here is to show you guys how to come up with this stuff and what I consider like the range, finding the player's range where he raises or calls pre-flop and knowing that going into the hand and making our decisions accordingly. I think... So with 70 big blinds here, obviously there's a great raising range. 5 deuce suited is on the low end, but honestly, I like it. This is an OG reg kind of guy, he's saying. And Grips always gives us a lot of great information about live tournament players. So if that's the case, then I don't know if he means he's an older guy, but he's only got 29 big blinds. I think that makes it a little sketchy to raise. So I'm going to go with call. Let's look it up. So we're in the small blind, or the effective stack is this guy. He's 30 big blinds. So we're playing against that. It doesn't matter that I have 70 here. We're in the small blind, and we are raised first in, meaning because everybody else folded. 5 deuce suited, I'm saying, is probably a call 60% of the time and probably a raise about 30 to 40% of the time. 5 deuce suited is a raise 55% of the time and a call 45% of the time. So I'm not hugely wrong. And I think in game I usually err on the side of aggression. So yeah, so I guess the raise is the move. But I'm going to stick with my original answer. I'll take the negative points here. I think if I was going to raise, I'm going to raise it to 15K. But I'm just going to go with call because that was my first instinct.
I like pretty much all options here with the exception of folding. If we were off suit, we could justify folding. We're getting quite a good price here. 5 to 1 on a call, only needing 16.7% equity to continue. And with suitedness, we definitely have that. It's also the bubble, so we can apply some pressure on our opponent.
Oh, I don't think he mentioned that. Yeah, he's on the bubble. Interesting. And I believe the reason is called the sneak attack hand, by the way, the 5 deuce suited, is because when you flop a wheel, somebody else has an ace, and you sneak attack them with the 5 deuce having 2 pair or a wheel. So it was just one of those early hands that people were like, oh, this hand has some wicked playability versus ace king, because when the board comes off ace, low card, I have a ton of equity. People didn't think that way back then, but...
Calling is a great play. We get a really good price here. We get to see the flop very cheaply. And if our opponent comes in for a big raise, easy fold. Raising small also has a lot of value. Our opponent's going to fold probably about 50 to 70% of hands pre-flop, given that the bubble is coming up. And if he doesn't fold pre-flop, we can take.
If I knew the bubble was coming up, I would have said raise, and I think I would have just made it 15K.
Down with a c-bet on a lot of boards as well. Raising to 15,000 has a similar effect, just risks a little bit more pre-flop. We'll get a few more pre-flop folds and lead to him having a tighter range post-flop. I opted to go for a call here, but all options other than folding really are good in this spot. Opponent checks. Flop is jack of spades, six of spades, deuce of clubs, giving us bottom pair. And a backdoor straight draw. What should we do? Should we check? Bet 7,000 or bet 12,000?
So I'm actually making a video right now for YouTube about betting bigger on flops. And in a limped pot with no aggressive action, everybody can have everything, right? So when we make a pair, it's pretty valuable. That being said, we are blind versus blind. And if we had a jack, we wouldn't want to overbet this. So I'm going to go with the small bet here. I actually think my bet here would be like a blind, would be like 5K. But I think 7K is fine also. 12K has a lot of merit because you can go for the kill pot with that big bet. But I think because of the draws and because of the fact that it is just a deuce and we don't have any of the suit out here, like if it was the, 5 deuce of spades, obviously we would want to go. But let's say that's the 6 of hearts. The 5 deuce of spades then becomes a much bigger, backdoor hand because we don't have the immediate flush draw. But I think betting small here accomplishes enough that when our opponent doesn't have anything, he just folds, and we can later bluff later streets if things go well for us.
In these blind versus blind spots, especially on dry boards, often the first player to bet at the pot is going to take the pot down. And this is a spot where we want to do that. We want to take the lead in the hand, just protect our pair of twos if it's the best hand, and if not, turn it into a semi-bluff where we can improve to the best hand or potentially barrel our opponent off on good runouts. As for sizing, we don't need to bet big here. 40% pot is going to be plenty enough to fold him off just random junk that didn't connect with the board, the queen 9 offsuits, maybe the ace highs, the 8 highs, things like that. We are ahead of those hands at this point, but we're not a huge equity favorite against them, and being out of position is going to be tough to realize our full equity. So I like a bet here for a small amount, and our opponent continues with a call. Checking also works. You can play your hand for showdown value looking for a check call, but you're much more likely to get barreled off your hand by taking that line, and with bottom pair, that's going to happen a lot. I prefer check calling with a hand like top pair here than I do with bottom pair. Turns glorious for us. 5 of hearts giving us 2 pair. Action is on you. What should you do? Should you check, bet 15,000, or bet 30,000?
So these small blind spots get really muddled because the deck is wide open for players, and you can't really say the player can have 6-5 or whatever. Like, he can have everything. So because there was no raise pre-flop, we have no information to base anything on. But obviously the 5 is a great turn for us. I mean, only a deuce of hearts is better for us. I don't like checking because we may not see a bet on the turn, and the player has 138K, and when he has a jack, we want to get it all in. And we also don't want him to draw. So maybe, let me think here. So if we put in 15K and he calls it, then that puts another 30K in the pot. That's 60,000, and he's got 100 and something left. We're only going to get it in probably if we're beat. He's not going to really go broke with one pair. So maybe this is one of those cases to just bet big, because if we bet 30,000, right, full pot, and let's say he has a jack. This is similar to the flop scenario with Assassinato from earlier today. If we bet 30,000 and he has a jack, I don't believe he's folding. And we do look like we're full of shit because we didn't raise pre-flop, and a lot of jacks raise pre-flop. I mean, going back to that pre-flop opening range, all the Broadway jacks raise pre-flop. So without a raise, and all the way down to jack 7 offsuit, without a raise, I think it's not very common for him to think that we'd ever have a jack and play this way. So when he has a jack, I believe we can get the call quite often. So I think in this exact scenario, I like the big bet. I might be overthinking it, but then again, using geometric betting, if we bet 30 and he calls it, he has 108K left, and there is now, what is that, 90K in the pot. So, or 89K in the pot approximately. So it's about a pot size bet, and we can actually jam all safe rivers and get called by Queen Jack here a lot. That would have raised us. Jack 9 a lot. So yeah, I'm gonna bet big. I'm gonna go for the fast play.
Unless our opponent is extremely aggressive and is going to be floating the flop extremely wide, there's not a ton of value in checking. In these blind versus blind situations.
Right, because he's got something here. And we want to bet that when he has something, like he's not going to just float widely without that, preconceived notion about him. So that means that if he was floating and we checked, he would then take the opportunity to bluff. He's not in here with many bluffs, which means he does have value hands, which is why betting is superior. Maybe the big bet is too much, but he didn't give me the option for my bet, which would have been about 22 or 24,000.
These small pots. A lot of times people are trying to get to showdown cheaply rather than expensively, so he's unlikely to start just barreling off if we check on the turn. If, however, you know him to be an insanely aggressive opponent, checking to go for a check call and then a check raise on a later street makes sense. That being said, it's more likely our opponent is looking to get to showdown with a pair, so we want to bet and we want to keep betting for value. 15,000 is a size that's going to get called by a 6, it's going to get called by a jack, it's going to get called by a flush draw, it's going to get called by a wide continuing range.
It's true, but I don't think it's the best bet, personally. I think you have to go at least 20,000 here, because then you get jammed on by a lot of flush draws, you get jammed on by a lot of pairs, pairs of jacks, good jacks like Queen Jack that might not raise pre-flop. And obviously trap hands like, over pairs, stuff like that.
Whereas the larger bet size of, say, 30,000 is probably only going to get called by a jack, but it does give us the opportunity to stack a jack.
See, and that's what I like here. I'm kind of assuming that my opponent, what's the best hand he can have that doesn't beat me, and that's all jacks. You know what I'm saying? When we get the money in versus any other hand that is playing properly here, we kind of lose. 6-5, 3-4, two pairs, jack deuce, 5 deuce, 6 deuce. All those hands we don't beat. So I like betting big here because I want this player to either commit now or, fuck right off.
On the river. So it's really...
Because we're allowing the flush draw and straight draws to call. Like if the guy has, even the 6-3 can call here, or something like deuce 3 of spades or deuce 4, what I'm saying, or just a suited ace. Like the ace 4 of spades here is monstrous against us. Like it's just got so much equity.
If you want to play for stacks against a narrow range, go for the larger bet size.
That's what I like
If you
doing.
want to get a smaller amount of value from a wider range of hands, then go for the smaller bet size.
I think it's
When it calls, river is a deuce. We basically have the nuts. Flush draw misses. Actions on you. What should you do? Should you check? Bet 20,000, bet 40,000, or go all in?
I mean, here's the thing. My betting pattern, I was doing it to get all in by the river. So I'm going all in. I think Gripst is going to say to go for about 40K. But my instinct is to go all in. And I think if the player rolls a jack here, I think we would get called by the all in every time because that's what I was setting up for. So I'm going to stick with my answer. Even though if I was gaming the game, I would say it's 40,000 because he's bet 15 now on the turn. Well, I guess that's the difference. Wait a minute. He's bet 15 now on the turn, so there's 60K in the pot. So going all in isn't a good play anymore. Now we can either go for the small bet and try to get raised by trapping, trapping for the raise, like instigating the raise, or we could just go for straight value. I think if I had bet 15 on the turn, which is the question we're being asked now because we didn't get to bet, 30K on the turn, I think I would bet 40,000 now.
we basically find ourselves in a similar situation to the situation on the turn. If our opponent is very bluff happy, we can check here to induce a bluff from the missed flush draws, but a 6 is checking back. A jack may go for value. So if it's someone who's capable of value betting, then checking here makes a lot of sense to both induce bluffs and...
But we're most likely getting hero called. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the most likely scenario, is we're going to get hero called here, because bluffing would take quite a bit of aggression, and the player would have to think something about us that we, can't read his mind. So
get in value.
we're trying to get bluff caught.
That was not our read on this opponent, though. This was a tighter regular who's looking to get to showdown as cheaply as possible, so it's our job to set a price that is reasonable and affordable. 20,000 is going to get called by everything, but 40,000 is going to get called by almost the same hands that 20,000 will, and we get paid twice as much. The all-in sizing would be better against someone we know is interested in making hero calls, who lives a bit more on the dangerous side, wants to make a big play, and that is not who this opponent was. So betting 2x the pot here is actually likely just going to get him to fold a jack rather than call with it.
Yeah.
So we go for 40,000.
Because the stack to pot
Because that
ratio
middle
is
ground
wrong.
going to get called by the widest range for the largest amount, and that's exactly what our opponent does, calls and mucks. We don't know what he had. We just know he giggled a little bit when he saw our hand, and we took down a 139,000 chip pot, building us to a very healthy stack. Day 2 of this tournament on the bubble. Anyway, this has been Evan Jarvis for PokerCoaching.com. Hope you enjoyed the quiz. Hope you learned a thing or two. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.
It's interesting that he said the player giggled and then mucked. That tells me the player did have more than we gave him credit for. So he might have flopped 2 pair jacks up. Or he might have had a deuce and rivered the trips. Unlikely. He could have had a straight for sure, but it's kind of unlikely unless he has exactly 3-4 of spades. I think that's the only one that calls the flop instead of raising. I think the 3-4 offsuit is more likely to raise. Yeah, I think this is one where we sucked out on the river here in this exact scenario. So I think my big bet on the turn would have worked because we would have just gotten called and then we would have jammed the river. It's a cooler situation that we got lucky on, I think. Or maybe he ended up with a hand that he couldn't fold, like, 6-5 that... again, we drew out on. He could just have king jack and have really played it weakly because, like you said, the player's the kind who wants to get the showdown cheap. But those players also don't like to be bluffed at all. So I think it's a good spot. And plus, when we're on the bubble, bluffing all in, it just seems much more likely than somebody having a hand against you because they know that you want to cash. So I've done it in situations and had players call me. I had one that we reviewed yesterday where the player ended up calling me. I had the nut flush, and I had played it like I was on a flush draw, and I hit the nut flush on the river, and he paid my value bet with 4th pair. He had pocket 6s, and there was 4 cards higher or 3 cards higher than that on the board and the flush draw. And just because he didn't want to get bluffed, we were on the bubble, and it was an interesting dynamic. And yeah, I think this is one where the value was missed. I like my fast play better here, but this definitely has merit, and I'm saying about 50% of the time I probably would have played it similarly. Let's go to the next one.
This is a 1K online tournament. We got 10-9 suited, full trust on the button. We're on 20 bigs. We can either limp in here, min raise to 200, or go all in.
It's a tough one. Very good pro here. He'll know what we're doing. He's going to 3-bet a lot. 20 big blinds. The blinds are only 50 and 100, though, so it's still early in this tournament, which means we have taken a hit. Like these other stacks, this is part of the matrix of doing this, is that he's saying all the stacks are comparable, but this is early in this tournament. It's an online 1K, and unless this is like a hyper turbo, we're going to have more chips than this. So I think just raising is fine here. I think if these stacks were bigger and we were at 20 big blinds, like we were in that stage of a regular tournament where these blinds are now 500 and 1,000, and we have 20 big blinds, with 20,000, then I think it's an open rip. I think in this exact scenario, though, it is a raise. I'm going to look it up before we answer, though. But I think my answer is just a raise to 200. So 20 big blinds from the button. Raising first in, 10-9 suited is a raise. So I'm correct. Doesn't really matter what the stakes are. See, but now that's the funny part, because now in a perfect GTO world, we're supposed to raise it, but Faraz is saying jam, which I get the jam, but I feel like it's too early in this tournament. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe these blinds are 500 and 1,000, and he just entered this into a hand replayer as 50, 100, but it just doesn't make sense. So, all right, we'll see what he says. My original instinct is to jam, but I think there's more playability here when we're all comparable stacks. You know what I'm saying? When this is a hyper turbo, 1K online, and those tournaments do exist, we're all going to have about 20 big blinds, about the fourth blind level in, which is 50, 100. And then a raise is perfectly reasonable because your stack plays bigger than its actual blinds.
So at this stack size, we could actually just jam here because it's one of those spots where our hand's not good enough to raise call. And raise folding kind of sucks. It's such a good hand. That said, it is a bit of a big jam. It's kind of right on the border. I'd say if I had 25 bigs here, I would lean towards more limping possibly, as we could get 3-bet heavily at that stack size, or even a lot of big jams. At 15 big blinds, I'm definitely just jamming here.
Yeah.
20 big blinds is...
That's a good technique to use, to go, what would I feel comfortable doing here with 25 big blinds? Like, go to the next level, because on 25 big blinds, I feel like I'm just going to open raise all day. Limping is a strategy that doesn't exist in the tournaments that I play. This is a 1K buy-in online. I'm not playing those. But if I was in my standard, buy-in level of average buy-in level of about $10, and I had 25 blinds, I would just raise this here because it's too many chips to jam, and the hand's too good to fold. So the raise is obvious. And if I had 15 blinds here, what would I do? Well, I would just straight rip it. And let's go ahead and check my my feelings about that. So with 25 big blinds, it should still be a raise. 10-9 suited, yeah. And with 15 big blinds, what is it? An all in. So that can kind of help you make your decisions when you're in the middle ground and you don't know. Go up one level, go down one level, and say, well, if I had 25, I would raise. And then you can go, well, if I had 15, I would just jam. So now you're in the middle and you have to go, well, I think it's a 50-50 then, because this is how we play it in the real world. So I think all these answers are fine. And it just depends on my reads of the players behind me. With a very good pro in the small blind, that would be a reason to just jam. And he says this is a very good pro. That would be a reason to just jam because the very good pro is going to 3-bet us quite often, which is going to suck. So I think jamming is the move in that exact case. So just a different way to think about your opening ranges.
It's still a decent size reshove, so I don't hate raising. Really all options are okay here, but I'd probably lean towards jam, and my second favorite option would be to limp, and my least favorite option would be to raise. I did decide to limp here. Small man limps, who's a very good pro, and the big blind also.
This is one where we have to take with a grain of salt because it is a buy-in level that we're not playing and a structure that we're not playing. A hyper turbo 1K is not something I'm going to be playing until I have, probably much like Faraz, a bankroll of over 500K. Much different scenarios there with higher level players with higher bankrolls.
So checks it. Flop comes 9-8-4 with 2 diamonds. We can check it back, bet 120, bet 200, or bet 320.
I think we want to bet, and we want to bet fairly large. Because it is such a draw-heavy board, I think when we bet and get raised, we're usually always up against a draw because 10-jack, 10-7, 6-7, and all diamond combinations are going to raise this flop. So honestly, I like betting 320. That's my play. Then again, I don't play this level, so there might be a reason here to check for pot control with a 9 because there was no raise pre-flop, and a 9 is pretty good when there's no raise pre-flop. It's not very likely somebody has something great. But that means that they're more likely to have draws and slices. So when somebody has ace 8 here, they're probably going to check raise us. You know what I'm saying? So I like the big bet.
So this is a board we're probably going to be doing a decent amount of checking with.
See, I think this is just based on the buy-in and the structure. I think this is one that's not going to work well for my purposes. But I think at the buy-in level I'm playing, I think I'm playing this correctly.
Even a lot of our kind of, if we trap with something like ace king suited, ace queen suited, a lot of those hands are going to be checking. The big blind's range is pretty garbagey. The small blind's range is a lot stronger since they, called. So I'm mixing here between betting and checking. Lots of times in these spots when we limp, I am betting just one big blind, but because the small blind called, I don't mind who has a stronger range. I don't mind betting a little bit bigger here. So I can go with either 200 or 320. I think both are reasonable options.
See, and like I say, I mean, at the blind levels I play at, you're probably never betting half pot. Like, I'm only betting half pot to get called. And on a board like this, you don't want to bet and make it easy for a flush draw or straight draw to call you. You want to bet bigger. So I think if we gave this quiz back to Faraz and said this is a $15 buy-in online, I think he would play it completely differently.
And I like checking as well. I did decide to check here. I think we're going to have a lot of ace high, kind of king high type hands, and we could induce a lot of bluffs on later streets. So that's what's driving that decision. Small blind leads out 320, pretty big. This is a pretty straightforward call, so we don't need to do a quiz here. Opponent checks to us, so we can bet smaller for 400, larger for 700. We can go all in, or we can check it.
He didn't give us the right options. He said we can bet small for 400. We can bet whatever. So I'm going to say I'm going to click call because I think that's where the quiz is bugged. So the turn is a call.
Opponent checks to us,
so
we can bet smaller for 400.
There it is.
Larger for 700. We can go all in, or we can check it.
It's a tough one because there's 1K in the pot, and although I feel like the opponent bet big on the turn for the purposes of trying to steal with one bet, and maybe if they make their hand do something tricky on the river, which means only really 5-6 or ace-5 here can play this way. Got to go back to work later, buddy. All right, my man. I'll see you later. Just about to wrap it up anyway. It's a play day, so I'll be back on at around 3 o'clock Vegas time. So I think in those instances, when the player has exactly 5-6 or ace-5, I think in those instances he would check quite a bit. But we're seeing monsters under the bed. So what's the hand that bets big on the turn that calls us on the river? Second pair. I think top pair keeps betting. I think a 9 keeps betting. I think second pair, something like 7-8. Yeah. And I think this is a situation where we just want to bet for reasonable value. I don't know if they call us with for 70% pot, so I'm going to play a smaller value bet here and just try to get called. I also think this bet has a very polarizing feel. I think if you have something, you'll call, and if you have the nuts, you'll jam, and if you have nothing, you'll jam. So if he was just taking a shot on the turn with, let's say, a flush draw, he's going to jam the river when we bet 400. So we're basically saying we're going to bet 400 and not fold when jammed on, because the hands that jam on us are all bluffs that we beat and the nuts. And there's only really two nut hands, which is the 6-5, which would have to be suited, which a good pro would 3-bet pre-flop from the small blind quite often, although in this format, I guess a call is great if it's suited, or the ace-5 of diamonds, which I really believe is 3-betting a lot. Now, there are other suited aces that he can have, but I don't know if they bet the turn as a raw bluff, with just a gut shot and an overcard. It's possible, but let's give him all the combinations of suited aces with the ace five. So you're talking about, there's the ace five of diamonds, ace five of clubs, ace five of spades, ace five of hearts. That's four combinations of that. There's also four combinations of the suited 6-5, but I think that three bets honestly a lot, but in this format, who knows? So that's 8 hands. 6-5 offsuit would defend. It's getting a great price. So there's 16 total combinations of 6-5. So let's go with 20 combinations, those 16 combinations and the 4 suited aces that just call and don't 3-bet pre-flop. So that's 20 hands versus all bluffs in the deck. And any 2 diamonds can bluff. Any 5 can bluff here because they have the straight blocker. Any pair or any pair with gut shot, like an 8-7 or a 8-10 or even 10-jack, all those hands can call pre-flop and now bluff rivers. When they check and they just give up, and then we bet small, they can think that we're just full of crap, or maybe we're just trying to get some little value, and then they jam on us. It's kind of a hard call if you don't think about it, but I think it's a snap call if you do. So I'm going to bet 400 and not fold if we get the option when he jams.
I think all the bet options are reasonable. I think checking would be way too weak here. We just have the best.
See, again, this is a buy-in level and a format that I'm not anywhere near playing yet, so this hand played very differently. So I like reviewing it for the buy-in that I'm playing at, and I don't think I'm being arrogant to say that a $1,000 buy-in tournament plays wildly differently than a $10 buy-in tournament. So I think you have to keep that in perspective when you're studying stuff like this.
And very often. So, and we definitely have some, 10 jack, jack queen, diamonds, stuff we could have called the turn and play this way. So I'm definitely betting here. I did decide to go all in.
That's the other option.
I'm going to do that sometimes, but I'd say
because an 8 calls us a 7, 8-7, ace 7, or sorry, ace 8. Even ace 4 can call here a lot. So this is the best bet if you're not going to bet small, I think.
Bird's bet size is probably 700 here. But versus a good pro who's capable of big hero calls, I'm willing to kind of mix in something like this as well sometimes. We get called by King 8.
The second pair with good kicker. Yeah, and I like that I came to the same conclusion on the big bet. But again, this is way outside my buy-in level, so interesting to see, and some of this can be integrated. I could integrate this later in a tournament, like being on the final table bubble or even on the final table. This is a hand I could definitely see being played that way. But then again, relatively, the stakes are very high versus the buy-in. So I'm saying, we're talking about a high stake from the start, 1,000. Doing this on the final table bubble or even on the final table itself, 7-handed or whatever, the stakes are much higher than just our $10 buy-in. So I think relatively it's similar in that instance, but otherwise I don't think I can directly input this into my arsenal right now. So let's do another one. I think Lexi Gavin's got one coming up.
Hey there, students. Tristan Wade here.
Nope, Tristan.
Bring you another hand from a cash game I played. 2-5 no limit hold'em, and we have a random splasher raising in middle position to 15. Tight Timmy calls on the hijack, and action folds to us on the button here with ace queen offsuit. What do you think we should do? Should we fold? Should we call? Should we raise to 50 or raise to 65?
So it's an interesting scenario. If these two players had different seats, the answer would be different. But I think when the random splasher opens and then the tight player just calls, I think a 3-bet is more in order, because when the tight player just calls and we 3-bet from the button and the random splasher who's going to call wide calls, Timmy's going to go away. So I like a bet here, and I like a big bet. I think 65 is good because of the extra call already in there. My only other option here, I think, is to call using my position and the strength of my hand to determine what I do next. It is a cash game, which plays different than tournaments, but I typically err on the side of playing in tournament style because it is deep stack poker, and in the start of tournaments, that's basically what you're playing. you have 200 blinds, so it's basically a cash game. So I like isolating the splashy player. I don't want to let Timmy come along with his pair of tens or something, and this kind of player that would fold that. So I'm gonna raise 65.
Calling here, I'm not a huge fan of, just because even though we have the ninth best hand, I don't want to play 3 or 4 ways with this hand in particular, and I think it better serves as a 3-bet when we're not suited and we're not dominating folks on the flush draws here. So with this offsuit variant, I don't love just calling here. I think raising is better, and I think raising to 50 at least is fine, although given the stack sizes, we probably want to raise a little bit bigger to discourage from too many hands flat calling us by the random splasher. So I think 65 is probably the best sizing, but in game I went with 50. I think it's fine, but I probably should have been a little bit bigger. Now the big blind just cold calls 45 more, the splasher calls.
That's
and
weird.
then Tight Timmy just calls. So we've got $210 nearly going to the flop. The flop comes ace 9-5, 2 diamonds. Unknown blaster in the big blind checks. The random splasher now bets 200, and Tight Timmy calls 200 with $35 left. What should we do here? Should we fold? Should we call? Or should we go all in ourselves?
I hate this like a lot because I feel like we're up against a set a lot. This player is random, so he could have any flush draw. This is my problem. And the just call is a super bad spot. And we have this player behind. I hate this, so I am folding.
So
Fuck
in
you.
game, this was
The answer is go all in because he's going to say this player can have anything. But it's the tight player here. You know what I'm saying? It's the tight player. He didn't 3-bet pre-flop. You mean to tell me he's not going to have a set the majority of the time here? I don't even know if I believe this. We have the ace of diamonds, which takes away the suited ace. This could be just a random king, a random ace, or it could be 2 random cards that are a flush draw. But what is this player cold calling out of the blind with? No, I hate this. I'm disagreeing with this right away.
kind of a tough spot for me, although maybe it shouldn't be.
This is a 2-5 game. I don't know what if this is in California, maybe the answer is different, but the majority of 2-5 games going all in here is literal suicide because somebody is going to have the flush and no one. This guy is not going to fold for this jam, which when he has a flush draw, that's great, but he's going to have 2 pairs a lot. He's going to have ace king a lot. Believe it or not, he's a random splasher. He can still have ace king, and he's never going to consider folding it here.
I was really worried about the tight player in between me and the splasher.
Yeah, because what's he doing? What possible hand is he calling pre-flop that you are now beating? Ace Jack? From a tight player. He's calling an open, fine, but then he's calling a 4-bet that has been cold called out of the big blind and by the original raiser. You really think Ace Jack looks that good right here? No, I think this one is retroactively made perfect by the coach. I don't like this.
And I was also a little confused as to why the splasher would just bet pot here. So me trying to decipher that in game took a minute. Now I also have a player behind me that I'm not overly worried about. So I'm just gonna.
It's a minefield. Are you kidding me? I mean, this player behind can have all the monsters. Like, you 4-bet, right? It's not like it was 4-bet, call, then he got to call over here. He's over here. You 4-bet, he calls pre-flop. Believe it or not, he can have aces a lot here. You know what I'm saying? He can have aces, kings, queens a lot here because of the random splasher. He knows this guy's random. He may 5-bet. Then when this guy folds and it comes back to you and you jam, then he just goes call with his fucking pair of aces, and you're just, stuck pre-flop. So that is not uncommon in a 2-5. I'm really getting kind of angry about this hand.
Focus on the 2 players in front of me. Now the guy just leading 200 into 3 players seems pretty strong, but
It's not.
if they had flopped a set here, would they be taking action away from me or the player behind them? And I think that's unlikely. So I don't really think
No,
we
he's
would
not
go
the
against,
problem.
Nines or fives. It's possible the random splasher could have a hand like 9-5 suited that just wants protection. But again, that's a little out there because those are pretty strong.
Ace 9 is happening, though. There are suited combinations of Ace 9 and suited combinations of Ace 5, but he's random, so he can have all the combinations of Ace 9 and Ace 5. He can also have all the flush draws. Like, he's going to lead with all flush draws. We know that.
Strong hands on this board, and they might want to check raise. And then when we just look at Tight Timmy, I just felt like Tight Timmy was a tight player who wasn't going to put their money in too lightly here. And the fact that I have the Ace of Diamonds in my hand concerned me quite a bit. That I thought Timmy might have just flopped a set here and been trying to get extra action.
Yeah.
But given that we cover, or we don't cover, but given that we have a big side pot to win with the random splasher.
So you're talking about winning a side pot of 550 after giving up 200 right now. So you're actually only playing for a 425 side pot. Let's do the math here. So you're 425 effective after this bet. So if you go all in here and this guy calls you for 425, which by the way is only likely if he has a flush draw, which is likely. So then you're playing for an 825 side pot, and you started the hand with $680. So you can win 825, right? Or which makes you a profit of $145, or you can fold now, take the $65 loss, and never run into the monster behind. You know what I'm saying? Or this guy's flush draw. Because when you're only going to win, you're only going to profit on the hand. Like, this is a negative equity right here. This isn't a free roll. You shouldn't even count this side pot or this main pot as something you can win, because this is the strongest hand on the game right here. You're basically saying, is it worth it here to risk $625 to profit from here? What is it? We'll get 425, but we've already invested so much, where the amount of times that we win is not going to be outweighed by what we win. So
I think we just go with our hand here, given that we do have the Ace of Diamonds as backdoors, and that our Ace Queen is likely good.
no.
If this person is just trying to get the money in with a weaker hand, like an Ace 10 type hand,
Really?
that's great for us.
That's what the type player is trying to do. Ace 10, really? This is a retroactively perfect one. I don't like this at all. This is just bad.
So, long-winded explanation, but I think the pot's big enough, the ranges are wide enough. Even though there's a tight player in between, we have extra money to win.
You didn't
on
even
the
mention
side.
this guy.
And my hand's just really strong here, so I think it's a pretty easy and mandatory all-in, which I do make the all-in. Now, this splasher doesn't have to call after betting
He didn't even mention the fact that this guy folded. Like, he just forgot he was there.
200, but I think they probably will. And that's fine, and Tight Timmy also calls it off. And let's see what we're up against. We're up against an Ace-4 suited from the random splasher, so that's beautiful. And Tight Timmy has about one of the hands that we would expect, that we hope that they have.
Yeah, you don't expect it, you hope it. That's misspoken. He's tight. If you're saying he's tight, he's not cold calling an open with King 10. A tight, aggressive player is going to 3-bet the random splasher, but he just calls 20. He calls 15, and then you made it 65. I mean, yes, in this exact scenario, he should call, but that's not what a tight player would do. A tight player folds here because they know that they need to make a flush to win.
Is just King High Diamonds.
This is bad.
I really do think, except having maybe Queen Jack of Diamonds or Queen 10 of Diamonds, King 10 of Diamonds and King Jack of Diamonds are the only combos. And then the other hands I'd be worried about are pocket 9s and pocket 5s.
Yeah.
So, what is that? That's like 4 to 6 diamond combos, and then 6.
But he's not the one you figure for the diamonds. He's the one you figure for the set. Okay? So you figure this guy for the diamonds, and you don't just give him 4 to 6 combinations, you give him all of them, including the ones that have made 2 pair and now have you fucked.
Set combos. So it turns out to be like kind of a dicey spot against a tight player if they don't have a lot of draws here and if they don't have many
Yeah, your read is wrong. If you think this is a tight player, your read is wrong.
ace X's. So if we can't throw like ace jack here in tight Timmy's range, you know, it's a pretty dicey spot. So luckily there's the side pot money, and luckily we have Timmy beat, and we end up holding.
Remember what he said? Luckily, we had the side pot money. Luckily, we ended up having him beat. Luckily this, luckily that. Dude, if you want to gamble, go play a fucking slot machine. This is just ridiculous. So,
For a pretty sizable pot.
sorry, I know you guys can hear that. It's a little loud.
And yeah, hope you enjoyed the lesson there about the tight range that was in between us, how many combos are actually going to be in that range, and then how the math stacks up that even if we think Timmy has a set there, we're still getting a good price.
No, you're not. You're risking $625 to win a profit, or you're risking your whole stack and chopping out this 200. So you're trying to basically make $120 on the pot by risking $625. This hand is what the guy said. I need to turn something in for the site. I'm making this hand retroactively perfect because it just so happened to work out for me when I made a mistake. He made a mistake here. He should be folding this one. This is one where you fold it, and then when you see the showdown, you go, ah, well. You know what I'm saying? And you just go, ah, I only lost one bet. I can't call there. That's stupid. This one long-term will get you homeless.
Against this weaker range with the side pot we have, and the fact
Like I said, he can have all the suited combinations. Ace 4 is not far from Ace 5 or Ace 9. Like, he can have all of them. He even said, I hope he has Ace 10. Like, this is just ridiculous.
backdoor diamonds is the parachute failsafe as well. Thanks for joining me, Tristan Wade. Moving on to the next one.
Yeah, bad. This is a bad one. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here. I feel like I am totally awake now because of that aggression and disagreement. I don't care. I will meet this player one day, I'm sure, and hopefully he sees this and realizes that I am absolutely 100% disagreeing with him. I think he's a great coach. I've seen a lot of other great stuff from him, but this is not some of it. This is a retroactive perfect hand where he decided he was a genius. And you're not, bro. This is a bad decision here. Long term, this is a bad decision. It worked out this one time, but this is not where you want to be for a profit of 20% of your money. Not where you want to be. All right, so I'm going to end it, and I'll be back around 3 o'clock, and we're playing today. So I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.